Hello everyone, welcome back to again grade 12 students. Today started our chapter 8 revision biomechanism and sports, and our topic is today especially Newton's law of motion and its application in sports. So dear students, last day we will discuss is the specially discussed is the topic biomechanism and main need and importance of biomechanism and types of movements, flexion, extension, abduction and adduction. So today our new topic is the Newton's law of motions and its application in sports. So firstly we will discuss is there are three laws of motions as given by Sir Leslie Newton. These are described below. First is the Newton's first law. Newton's first law of motion. So first law of motion is the main law of inertia. So main according to the first law of motion, an object is rest will remain at rest, or an object in motion will remain at motion at constant velocity unless acted upon by a force. It means an object remains in a state of rest or of uniform motion in a straight line unless compelled to change that state by an applied force. This is the main Newton's first law. Yeah, in other words, a motionless object or body will remain motionless in the same position. So unless a net force, external force disturb it or act on it. So similarly, a body moving with a constant speed along a straight path will keep on moving unless some force acts upon it and alters its speed or directions of the motion. So Newton's first law can be applied to any sporting activity. It explains two fundamental concepts linked with motion and force. Yeah, it tells us that a stationary body will remain at rest until an external force is applied. For example, for a pass in basketball, the ball will remain in the player's hands until he applied a force to the ball to pass it to a teammates. So it tells us that a moving body will continue to move with constant velocity until made to change its speed and or directions by an external force. For example, a moving football slows down and then stop after some time. It come to rest due to the friction, so between the ground and the ball. This is the Newton's first law of motion. So next is the Newton's second law of Newton's second law of motion. Okay, second law of first law. So Newton's second law is the law of acceleration. It means Newton's second law of motion is a expression of the interrelationship among force, mass, and acceleration. This law of now as the law of acceleration. Yeah, this law is known as the law of acceleration. The second law states that the acceleration of an object is dependent upon two variables, the net force acting upon the object and the mass of the object. The acceleration of an object depends depends directly upon the net force acting upon the object and inverse, inversely upon the mass of the object. As the force acting upon an object is increased, the acceleration of the object is increased. As the mass of an object is increased, the acceleration of the object is decreased. The main first is the in first example is the in football, a forward player who has received the ball in a strong position, so close to the goal, will only need to impart a relatively small amount of force in the direction of the goal. So however, a forward player who has been forced to the edge of the shooting circle before taking a kick will need to impart a large amount of force in the direction of the goal, as the ball will need a greater change in momentum to travel to the goal. And second is a cricket player which catching a ball moves his hand backward. Innately the ball is moving with a certain velocity. The player has to apply a retarding force to bring the ball at rest in his hands. So however in baseball players however in baseball player hits the ball hard to throw it far away. This is the second law of Newton. Third is the Newton's third law of motion. Newton's third law of motion. So Newton's third law of motion is the law of reaction. Okay, short form is the law of reaction. According to the Newton's third law of motion, to every action there is always an equal and opposite reaction. The third law of motion is also called the law of reaction. Example is first, springing from a diving board is an example of the law of action and reaction. The more force one exerts on the downward bounces, the higher he bunches into the air. Okay, this is the first example. Second example is when a swimmer pushes the water backward action, the water pushes the swimmer forward reaction. This is the action to reaction. And third example is the walking. When a person walks, he presses the ground in backward directions by his feet action, and the ground pushes him in forward direction. This is the reaction. Again I explain. Third example, walking. When a person walks, he presses the ground in backward direction by his feet action, and the ground pushes him to forward direction in reaction. This is the walking type. Okay, in ground in backward and ground in backward direction, and the ground pushes him in forward direction. This is the reaction. This is the third example of Newton's third law. So I hope you are understand this topic, Newton's law, and anyone student doubt for later this topic, especially biomechanism and sports related, please send message me. I explain all after this also new topics biomechanism and sports. So biomechanism and sports related, our main topic is biomechanism. Biomechanism is especially biomechanics is the study of force and their effects on living systems. Okay, the study of biomechanics provides the knowledge of human body movements and the force that act on human movements. Okay, this is the biomechanics. Next is the need and importance of biomechanics in sports related, improves performance in sports. The major goal of biomechanics in sports and physical exercises is to improve performance in given sport or physical exercises. For example, the correct biomechanics biomechanics of running allows athlete to carry out regular physical exercises for long enough periods of time without being seriously limited by the injuries and their consequences. Second is the improvement in techniques. So improvement in techniques related, in many sporting events technique is the major factor of performance. So sports techniques, so sport technique is a physical action of an athlete which leads to the best possible execution of a physical motion in conformity with the required task of a given sporting events. Improvement of technique with the help of biomechanism can be used by teachers and coaches to correct motions of students or athletes. So development of better sports equipment. This is the next importance of biomechanism in sports. Next is the improving training techniques. Biomechanics can help improve training of athletes by the analysis of teaching imperfections of a given athlete. The coach identify the type of training needed for the athlete to improve. So prevent sports injuries related. One of the goal of sports biomechanism is to provide recommendation for injury prevention and rehabilitations. A healthy athlete will perform better than an athlete posed with frequent injuries. So next is the help in understanding human body. An athlete is limited by strength or endurance of certain muscles group, by speed of motion, or by specific aspects of motion techniques. So in the case of certain sports skill, the required abilities to execute a motor task are not easy to detect, and quantitative biomechanism analysis must be used. Next is the uh, types of movements: flexion, action, abduction, and adductions. Okay, so main is there are several types of movements in joints. There are described in automatic terms. These are: first is gliding movement, second is angular movement, third is rotation, and fourth is circumductions. So main is the first is gliding movement. So gliding movement is the main. Gliding movement, it is the type of movement in which one surface moves or glide over another surface. So it is the simplest type of movement in which there is no rotation or a angular movement involves. So it is common in all of the joints, what it occurs in combination with the angular movements. So however, in smaller joints such as hand and feet, carpal and transversal joints, these are the only movements. Okay. So next is the angular movement. So angular movement is the angular movement related. This type of movement occurs between the long bonds, causing a change in the angular between the two bonds. The angular either increases or decreases. Various angle movements are flexion, extension, abduction, and adduction. These are explained in detail. Main is flexion and extension. Main flexion is the, for example, example of flexion include trunk, tuck jump, front dumbbells races. This is the main flexion. Okay, and extension is the opposite of flexion. Extension occurs when the angle between the two bonds increases. When you slighten or extend your knees joint, the angular between your upper and lower leg increases. Example of extension including straight leg deadlift, okay, yeah, tricep press down, military presses. And one more flexion and extension letters: when you flex your knee, the angular between your frame, this is thigh bones or upper leg, and your twin fibulum or lower leg decreases. Example is the flexion include trunk jump. Okay. So second is the next abduction and adduction. So abduction is a movement laterally away from the midline or center of your body from a standing position. When you move your leg to the side away from the middle of your body, you are abducting your leg. Example of abduction including straight arm, dumbbell, side races, star jump, hip abductions machines. Okay, so next, adduction is the movement in the opposite direction and towards the center of your body. When you return your leg from the abduction position back to a normal standing position, you are abduction your leg. Example of abduction include cable, crossover, pull down, supine, dumbbell, flies, hip adductions machines. Main rotation is the later third point. Rotation of the body parts can be towards or away from a center of the body. It is a form of movement in which the movement of bones is around a center axis without any displacement from the axis. So internal rotation or middle rotation refers to rotation towards the axis of the body. External rotation or lateral rotation refers to rotation away from the center of the body. Next is circumductions. Circumductions can be described as the movement of joint in a circummotion. It is the movement which takes place between the articular cavity and the head of a bone. It can also be visualized as a circular motion of the part being moved. It is a combination of flexion, action, abduction, adduction. It is most promontory seen at shoulder and hip joints. So this is the main part of types of movements. So I hope you are understand main meaning of biomechanism, need and importance of biomechanism in sports, types of movements and flexion, extension, abduction and adduction, and main next is the Newton's law of motions and its application in sports. So any student doubtful later this chapter, please send message me. I hope you are understand this topic. So thank you dear. Again read this topic and after this see this video in Facebook. Thank you and have a nice day.